Construction worker wins lottery and deceives wife to avoid splitting the prize, but she finds out. The sun had barely risen when Jack woke up that Saturday morning. The 45-year-old man, with hands calloused from years of hard work as a construction worker, stretched in the simple bed he shared with Sarah, his 37-year-old wife. He looked to the side and saw that she had already gotten up, probably to start her chores as a housekeeper in one of the homes in the city's upscale neighborhood. Jack sighed, feeling the weight of years and financial difficulties that had always accompanied them. He got up slowly, his sore muscles protesting against the movement. He walked to the small kitchen of his modest house, a simple construction he had built with his own hands in the backyard of his now deceased parents' property. As he prepared a strong coffee, Jack reflected on his life. He and Sarah had been together for almost 2 decades, having met when they were young at a community dance. Love blossomed quickly between them, and soon they were married, dreaming of a future full of achievements and happiness. However, reality proved to be very different from the dreams of youth. Financial difficulties were a constant in their lives, with Jack working tirelessly on construction sites around the city, and Sarah juggling cleaning services to supplement the family income. Despite all their efforts, they could barely pay the bills at the end of the month. Jack took a sip of the bitter coffee, feeling even more melancholic. He loved Sarah, but sometimes wondered if she didn't deserve better, someone who could provide her with a more comfortable life. He shook his head, pushing those thoughts away. They had made vows to stay together in joy and sorrow, in wealth and poverty. Determined to improve his mood, Jack picked up the newspaper on the table. It was yesterday's edition, which Sarah had brought from the house where she worked. He flipped distractedly through the pages until his eyes fixed on a colorful advertisement that occupied half a page. It was the result of the state lottery. With a sigh, Jack took out the ticket he had bought the previous week. It was a habit he had maintained for years, always playing the same numbers, a combination that included his and Sarah's birth dates as well as their wedding day. He knew the chances were slim, but that small weekly expense was the only luxury he allowed himself, feeding the dream of a better life. His eyes scanned the numbers on the ticket, and then those in the newspaper. Once, twice, 3 times. Jack's heart began to race and he felt his hands trembling. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The numbers were exactly the same. He had won the lottery. Jack jumped up, knocking over the chair in the process. His first impulse was to shout, to call Sarah, to share the incredible news, but something held him back. A voice in his mind, one he didn't recognize as his own, whispered a tempting idea. What if he kept the secret to himself? Confused by this unexpected thought, Jack sat down again, his hands still shaking as he held the winning ticket. The prize amount was astronomical, more money than he had ever dreamed of possessing. It could completely change his life, fulfill all the dreams he had abandoned over the years. But what about Sarah? Didn't she deserve to share in this fortune? After all, they had built a life together, faced all difficulties side by side. However, the more Jack thought about it, the stronger the idea of keeping all the money for himself became in his mind. He began to imagine all the things he could do, all the places he could visit, all the experiences he could have. And in none of these fantasies was Sarah present. It was as if, suddenly, she had become an obstacle between him and the life he had always wanted. Jack spent the rest of the day in a state of agitation, alternating between the euphoria of victory and the guilt of considering hiding everything from Sarah. When she arrived home late in the afternoon, exhausted after a long day of work, he could barely look her in the eye. "Is everything okay, Jack?" Sarah asked, noticing her husband's strange behavior. "Yes, yes," he replied quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm just a little tired." Sarah nodded, understanding as always. "I'll prepare dinner. Did you work today?" Jack shook his head. "No, there was no work today. I just stayed at home." As Sarah moved around the small kitchen, Jack watched her, feeling a mixture of love and resentment. She was a good wife, always dedicated and caring. But now, with the prospect of a new life before him, Jack wondered if that was enough. The following days were torment for Jack. He hid the winning ticket in different places around the house, constantly paranoid that Sarah might find it. At the same time, he meticulously planned his next steps. Finally, after a week of indecision and internal conflict, Jack made his decision. One night, as they were eating dinner in silence, he took a deep breath and said, "Sarah, we need to talk." She looked at him, surprised by the serious tone of his voice. "What is it, Jack? Did something happen?" Jack avoided her eyes as he spoke. I want a divorce." The sound of a fork falling on a plate echoed through the small kitchen. Sarah looked at Jack, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "What, Jack? What are you talking about?" "I can't take it anymore, Sarah," he continued, the words rushing out of his mouth. "This life, this routine, it's not what I want anymore. We married too young, maybe it was a mistake." Sarah was shaking her head, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Jack, if there's a problem, we can solve it together. We've always faced everything together." But Jack was determined. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind. "There's nothing to solve, Sarah. It's over. I want you to leave the house as soon as possible." "Leave the house?" Sarah repeated, incredulous. "But Jack, this house is ours. We built it together with our sweat and work." "The house is in my name," Jack responded coldly. "Legally, it's mine. You have a week to leave." Sarah covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Jack felt his heart tighten, but forced himself to ignore the pain he was causing. He had a plan and needed to follow it through to the end. "As for the division of assets," he continued, his voice trembling slightly, "I propose that each of us keep what is ours. No divisions, no complications." Sarah raised her face, her red and swollen eyes fixed on Jack. "How can you do this to me? After all these years, all our love." Jack looked away, unable to face the pain in his wife's eyes. "It's better this way, Sarah. For both of us." In the days that followed, the small house that was once a welcoming home transformed into a silent battlefield. Sarah, still incredulous at Jack's sudden change, alternated between moments of deep sadness and outbursts of anger. Jack, in turn, remained distant and cold, reinforcing his decision whenever Sarah tried to talk or understand what had changed. The news of the impending divorce spread quickly through the neighborhood. The residents, who for years had witnessed the couple's love and dedication, couldn't understand what had happened. Many tried to intervene, offer advice, or simply understand the situation, but Jack closed himself off more and more, refusing to give explanations. It was in this moment of deep despair that Sarah found an unexpected ally. Tom, the next-door neighbor. A man in his 40s, Tom had always been a discreet and kind neighbor, exchanging only cordial greetings with the couple over the years. Now, seeing Sarah's suffering, he decided to extend a helping hand. On a particularly difficult afternoon, when Jack's shouts echoed down the street demanding that Sarah leave the house immediately, Tom approached the gate. "Sarah," he called softly, "if you need a place to stay, my house is at your disposal." Sarah, with eyes swollen from crying so much, looked at Tom with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, Tom. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Tom replied with a gentle smile. "Neighbors are for times like these, aren't they?" With a heavy heart, Sarah accepted Tom's offer. That same night, with only a few suitcases containing her personal belongings, she left the house that had been her home for so many years. Jack watched her departure from the window, his face a mask of indifference that hid the internal turmoil of conflicting emotions. At Tom's house, Sarah found not only a roof, but also an attentive ear and a friendly shoulder. On nights when the weight of sadness seemed unbearable, Tom was there, offering a cup of tea and words of comfort. It was during one of these night conversations that Sarah, between tears, confided, "I don't understand, Tom. Jack changed overnight. We were happy. Or at least I thought we were. How can someone change so much?" Tom, who was listening attentively, frowned. "It is strange, Sarah, especially considering that Jack doesn't seem to have another relationship or apparent reason for such a drastic change." Tom's words planted a seed of doubt in Sarah's mind. What if there was something more behind Jack's sudden decision? What if he was hiding something? In the days that followed, Sarah and Tom began to discreetly investigate. They observed Jack's routine, talked to neighbors and acquaintances, seeking any clue that could explain the sudden change in behavior. It was Tom who first noticed something strange. "Sarah," he said one day, "have you noticed that Jack is no longer going to work regularly? He used to leave early every day for construction sites, but now he spends a lot of time at home. Sarah nodded, thoughtful. It's true. And when he does go out, he always seems hurried and secretive. The investigation took a new turn when one afternoon Tom saw Jack leaving the house carrying a small box. Curious, he discreetly followed him and saw him entering a bank in the city center. Sarah, Tom said upon returning, I think we've discovered something. Jack went to the bank today carrying a box. He stayed in there for hours. Sarah's eyes widened with realization. Do you think that he's hiding money? Tom nodded gravely. It's a possibility. But where would this money come from? It was then that Sarah remembered something. The lottery ticket. Jack always bought a ticket every week. It was our little ritual. With this new information, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Jack's sudden change, the unexpected divorce, the insistence on not dividing assets, everything pointed to a shocking conclusion. Jack had won the lottery and was trying to hide the prize from Sarah. But how can we be sure? Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Tom thought for a moment before answering. The ticket. If Jack really won, he must be keeping the ticket somewhere safe in the house. Sarah shook her head, defeated. But how are we going to get in there? Jack changed all the locks. A determined gleam appeared in Tom's eyes. Leave that to me. I have an idea. In the days that followed, Tom carefully prepared his plan. He observed Jack's routine, noting the times when the house was empty. Using his skills as a former locksmith, a profession he had abandoned years ago, he managed to make a copy of Jack's house key. One afternoon, when Jack left in a hurry, probably for another visit to the bank, Tom decided to act. With his heart racing, he snuck into the house, with Sarah watching the street to ensure Jack didn't return unexpectedly. Tom meticulously searched each room, looking for any hiding place that might contain the precious ticket. It was in the master bedroom, inside an old dusty Bible on the bookshelf, that he finally found what he was looking for, a carefully folded lottery ticket. With trembling hands, Tom checked the numbers. There was no doubt it was the winning ticket from the state lottery, with an astronomical value printed in small letters in the corner. Quickly, Tom photographed the ticket with his cell phone and returned it exactly where he had found it. He left the house as quietly as he had entered, his heart still pounding in his chest. When he showed the photo to Sarah, she was in shock. I can't believe it, she whispered, tears of anger and disappointment running down her cheeks. How could Jack do this to me, after all these years together? Tom hugged Sarah, offering comfort. Now we know the truth. The question is, what will we do with this information? Sarah pulled away, wiping away tears with determination. We're going to give Jack exactly what he wants, she said, a gleam of resolution in her eyes. He wants a divorce without division of assets? Well, that's what he'll get. Tom looked at her, confused. But Sarah, what about the lottery prize? A cunning smile appeared on Sarah's lips. Jack made a crucial mistake. He insisted on not dividing the assets, thinking that this way he would keep all the money. But if we don't divide the assets, the lottery prize, which he won during our marriage, legally belongs to both of us. Tom's eyes widened with understanding. And if you sign the divorce agreeing not to divide the assets? Exactly, Sarah completed. The prize will stay with me, since Jack didn't declare it as an asset to be divided. In the days that followed, Sarah and Tom worked meticulously on their plan. Sarah consulted a lawyer, explaining the situation and ensuring that her strategy was legally sound. Meanwhile, Tom continued to monitor Jack's movements, making sure the winning ticket remained hidden in the house. Finally, the day came when Sarah and Jack met at the lawyer's office to finalize the divorce. Jack could barely hide his anxiety, clearly eager to conclude the process and secure his newly acquired fortune. Sarah, on the other hand, maintained surprising calm. When the lawyer presented the divorce papers, she read them carefully, focusing especially on the clause that established the non-division of assets. Is everything in order? Jack asked, his voice betraying a slight tremor. Sarah looked directly into the eyes of the man who had been her companion for so many years. For a moment, she saw a glimmer of the Jack she had known and loved, hidden behind the mask of greed and selfishness. But that moment quickly passed. Yes, everything is in order, she responded softly, picking up the pen. With a fluid motion, Sarah signed the divorce papers, sealing the end of her marriage, and, unbeknownst to Jack, securing her share of the lottery prize. As they left the office, Jack couldn't contain a smile of triumph. Sarah, in turn, remained composed, knowing that the true victory was yet to come. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Tom waited patiently. They knew that Jack would eventually have to claim the prize, and when he did, their plan would come into action. The wait came to an end on a Wednesday morning. Sarah was having coffee at Tom's house when the phone rang. It was her lawyer with urgent news. "Sarah," he said, his voice laden with excitement, "Jack has just claimed the lottery prize. As we predicted, he didn't declare it during the divorce. Legally, half of that money is yours." Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, relief, sadness, and a hint of satisfaction. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We've already filed a petition with the court," the lawyer explained. "The bank has been notified, and the money will be frozen until the judge makes a decision. But with the evidence we have, there's no doubt you'll receive your share." After hanging up the phone, Sarah looked at Tom, who had heard the entire conversation. "We did it," she said softly. Tom smiled, taking her hand. "You did it, Sarah. Your strength and determination made this possible." That night, as Sarah and Tom discreetly celebrated their victory, Jack faced his worst nightmare. Upon arriving home, eager to start his new life as a millionaire, he was greeted by a court notice informing him that the lottery prize had been frozen. Desperate, Jack called his lawyer, who gave him the devastating news. By not declaring the prize during the divorce and insisting on the non-division of assets, he had inadvertently ensured that Sarah was entitled to half the value. Jack spent the night sleepless, alternating between fits of rage and moments of deep regret. How could he have been so foolish? How did he let greed blind him to the point of betraying the woman who had been by his side for so many years? The next morning, news of the lottery prize and the divorce drama had already spread throughout the city. Jack could barely leave the house, ashamed and fearful of the reactions of neighbors and acquaintances. Sarah, on the other hand, found herself at the center of attention. Local reporters wanted to hear her story. Neighbors offered support and congratulations. But amid all the commotion, Sarah felt strangely empty. "This isn't how I imagined our lives changing," she confided to Tom one night as they watched the news talking about the case. Tom looked at her with understanding. "You still love him, don't you?" Sarah sighed deeply. "I don't know if it's love, Tom, but we spent so many years together. It's hard to simply erase all of that." It was at this moment that the news anchor said something that caught both their attention. "If you've watched this far, please consider subscribing to the channel and comment where you live." Back to the story. Sarah and Tom exchanged a surprised look at the unusual interruption, but quickly turned their attention back to the report. In the days that followed, as the legal process took its course, Sarah found herself reflecting deeply on her life and her choices. The money she had longed for over the years was now within her reach, but at what cost? Tom, always present and supportive, became a fundamental pillar of support for Sarah. Their nightly conversations, once centered on pain and betrayal, now turned to the future and the possibilities that were opening up. "What do you plan to do with your share of the prize, Sarah?" Tom asked one night as they shared a cup of tea. Sarah was silent for a moment, contemplating the question. "You know, Tom, I spent so much time dreaming about what I would do if I had money. But now that I have it, I realize that the most important thing isn't what I can buy, but how I can use this to make a difference." Tom smiled, admiring Sarah's strength and wisdom. "You have an incredible heart, Sarah, even after everything you've been through." It was at this moment that Sarah made a decision that would surprise everyone. "Tom," she said, her voice firm with resolution, "I think I know what I want to do. But I'll need your help." In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Tom worked tirelessly on a plan that no one could have predicted. Meanwhile, the legal process followed its course, and finally the day came when the judge announced his decision. As expected, half of the lottery prize was officially awarded to Sarah. The news exploded in the local media. Everyone expected to see Sarah celebrating her victory, perhaps planning a life of luxury and extravagance. But Sarah had other plans. On a sunny morning, she called a press conference in the small city park. Journalists, neighbors, and curious onlookers gathered, eager to hear what she had to say. To everyone's surprise, Jack was also there, looking haggard and ashamed. Sarah climbed onto a small improvised platform, with Tom by her side offering silent support. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. In recent months, our community has witnessed a story of greed, betrayal, and pain, a story that unfortunately had me and my ex-husband, Jack, as protagonists." She paused, her eyes meeting Jack's in the crowd. He looked away, unable to hold her gaze. Many expected me to use this moment for revenge, to humiliate Jack or to boast about my legal victory. But the truth is, there is no real victory in this situation. We all lost something precious: trust, love, dignity. A murmur ran through the crowd, and Sarah saw tears in the eyes of some people. That's why I'm here today, not to celebrate, but to try to fix what was broken. Not just in my life, but in the life of our community. Sarah paused again, exchanging a look with Tom, who nodded encouragingly. "I've decided to donate half of my prize to create a foundation that will help families in need in our city. We want to offer financial, educational, and emotional support to those who are going through difficult times, just as I went through." The crowd erupted in applause and exclamations of surprise. Sarah waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "But that's not all. Jack," she said, looking directly at her ex-husband, "I know you're suffering too. I know your actions were driven by the desperation of a life of hardship. That's why I want to offer you the opportunity to redeem yourself." Jack looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise and confusion. "I'm offering you a position in the foundation. Your experience as a construction worker will be valuable in renovation and construction projects for needy families. Additionally, I'm willing to share a part of the prize with you, not out of legal obligation, but as a gesture of forgiveness and hope for the future." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Jack, waiting for his reaction. For a long moment he stood motionless, tears silently streaming down his face. Then, slowly, Jack walked towards the platform. Sarah came down to meet him, and they stood face to face, years of shared history hanging between them. "Sarah," Jack said, his voice choked, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "What I did was unforgivable," Sarah smiled softly. "Forgiveness isn't something we deserve, Jack. It's something we offer even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." Jack lowered his head, now sobbing openly. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything. I accept your offer. I'll do everything I can to redeem myself, to help others as you're doing." Sarah extended her hand, and Jack took it hesitantly. In that moment, they weren't ex-husband and ex-wife, nor victim and villain. They were just two people choosing forgiveness and compassion over bitterness and resentment. The crowd exploded in applause and shouts of approval. Journalists jostled to get the best photo of the moment, but Sarah and Jack barely noticed the commotion around them. Tom watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and a bittersweet feeling. He had fallen in love with Sarah during the time he supported her, but seeing the nobility of her character at that moment, he understood that his role was to be a friend and ally, not a romantic interest. In the months that followed, the small city saw a remarkable transformation. The Sarah Jack Foundation, as it became known, began working tirelessly to improve the lives of residents. Houses were renovated, scholarships were offered, and psychological support programs were implemented. Jack, true to his word, dedicated himself body and soul to the work of the foundation. His construction expertise proved invaluable, and gradually he regained the respect of the community. Sarah, in turn, emerged as a respected and beloved community leader. Her act of forgiveness and generosity inspired others to do the same, creating a wave of kindness that spread throughout the city. Tom remained a loyal friend and valuable advisor to both. Although his love for Sarah never completely disappeared, he found satisfaction in seeing the positive impact their joint actions had on the community. 1 year after the press conference that changed everything, Sarah, Jack, and Tom were sitting in the same park, watching children play on a new playground built by the foundation. "Who would have thought," Jack said, shaking his head with a smile, "that winning the lottery would lead us to this?" Sarah laughed softly. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Tom nodded, thoughtful. "The important thing is what we do with the surprises life brings us." The three sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on the journey that brought them here. a journey of pain, forgiveness, and redemption. You know, Sarah said finally, I think in the end we all won something much more valuable than money. Jack and Tom looked at her curious. We gained a second chance, she concluded, smiling. A chance to be better, to make a difference. As the sun set over the city, tinting the sky in golden and pink hues, the three friends remained there, united by an unusual story of loss and redemption. They had learned in the hardest way that true wealth is not in money, but in the connections we form, the lives we touch, and the good we choose to do, even when, especially when, it's difficult. And so what began as a story of greed and betrayal transformed into a testament to the power of forgiveness, compassion, and the human capacity to change and grow. The small city that witnessed this drama now became an example of how a community can come together and elevate itself, proving that sometimes, from the most unlikely situations, the most beautiful new beginnings can emerge. In the years that followed, the Sarah Jack Foundation continued to flourish, expanding its reach beyond the city limits. What began as a local assistance project became a model for social transformation, attracting the attention of other communities and even politicians and philanthropists from across the country. Sarah, with her natural compassion and newly discovered leadership ability, became the public face of the foundation. She frequently traveled, sharing her city's story and inspiring others to start similar projects in their own communities. Her charisma and sincerity touched hearts wherever she went, and soon she found herself being invited to national lectures and television programs. Jack in turn found redemption through hard work and tireless dedication to the foundation's construction and renovation projects. His skills as a construction worker, once used only to earn a living, were now the tool by which he built not just houses, but hope for needy families. Over time, he became a mentor to young people in the community, teaching them not only a trade, but also valuable lessons about integrity and second chances. Tom, always present as a pillar of support, took over the financial management of the foundation. His prudence and strategic vision were fundamental in ensuring that resources were used in the most efficient way possible, maximizing the positive impact on the community. In addition, he became a confidant for both Sarah and Jack, helping them navigate the emotional and practical challenges that arose in their new role as community leaders. As the years passed, the dynamic between the three evolved in unexpected ways. The friendship between Sarah and Tom, which once threatened to turn into something more, solidified into a deep and platonic bond. They discovered that their partnership worked best as friends and colleagues, complementing each other's skills in managing the foundation. Jack, for his part, underwent a profound personal transformation. The process of redemption led him on a path of self-knowledge and spiritual growth. He began practicing meditation and studying philosophy, seeking to understand the roots of his past actions and how he could become a better person. Curiously, it was this new version of Jack that began to reconnect with Sarah in a completely new way. No longer as husband and wife, but as two people who had gone through an extraordinary journey together and come out the other side stronger and wiser. 5 years after the fateful day Jack won the lottery, the city celebrated the foundation's anniversary with a large community festival. The park that was once the stage for the press conference that changed everything was now filled with stalls, music, and laughter. Sarah, Jack, and Tom were at the center of the celebrations, receiving thanks and hugs from countless residents whose lives had been touched by the foundation's work. In a quiet moment, the three retreated from the crowd and found a quiet bench under a large tree. "Look at all this," Sarah said, gesturing to the party around them. "Can you believe how much things have changed?" Jack shook his head, a serene smile on his face. "Sometimes it still feels like a dream. To think that I almost threw all of this away out of greed." Tom put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "The important thing is that you chose the right path in the end. We all make mistakes, Jack. It's what we do after them that defines who we are." Sarah looked at the two men beside her, feeling a wave of gratitude. "You know, I think the real miracle wasn't winning the lottery. It was how this money united us, transformed us." Jack nodded, thoughtful. "You're right, Sarah. The money could have completely destroyed us. Instead, it gave us the opportunity to become the best versions of ourselves." Tom smiled. "And not just us. Look around. This whole community has transformed. The three fell silent for a moment, observing the joy and unity that permeated the festival. Children ran and played, elderly people shared stories, young volunteers helped with various activities. It was a scene of harmony and prosperity that few would have imagined possible years ago. "You know," Sarah said finally, "I think we've learned a valuable lesson in all of this." "What's that?" Jack and Tom asked in unison. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "That true wealth isn't in the money we have, but in the good we can do with it. That forgiveness has a transformative power that goes beyond any amount of money, and that sometimes you need to lose everything to find what really matters." Jack took Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. "You've always been the wisest of us, Sarah. Thank you for not giving up on me, on us." Tom observed the gesture with an understanding smile. Over the years, he had learned to find happiness in friendship and shared purpose without the need for romance. "So, what's next for us?" Tom asked, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. Sarah took a deep breath, a gleam of determination in her eyes. "I think it's time for us to expand even further. There are so many communities out there that could benefit from what we've learned here. We can create a model that can be replicated in other cities, maybe even in other countries." Jack nodded enthusiastically. "I agree. We have so much knowledge and experience to share now. We could train other people to start similar projects in their own communities." Tom, always the pragmatist, was already doing mental calculations. It will require a lot of work and planning, but with the resources we have and the network of contacts we've built, it's definitely possible. Sarah looked at her two companions, feeling a wave of affection and gratitude. "Then it's decided. This is just the beginning of something even bigger." At that moment, as the sky tinged with golden and pink hues, the three friends sealed their commitment with a group hug. They had come a long way since the day a lottery ticket threatened to destroy everything. Now, united by bonds stronger than any legal contract or romantic relationship, they were ready to take their mission to the world. As night fell over the party and the first stars began to dot the sky, Sarah, Jack, and Tom remained under the large tree, sharing stories, laughing at old memories, and dreaming about the future. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it together. And so, the story that began with an act of selfishness and betrayal transformed into a saga of redemption, forgiveness, and shared purpose. And the lottery prize, which once threatened to destroy lives, became the seed of a change that would continue to grow and flourish for many years to come. As the party continued around them, full of joy and hope, Sarah, Jack, and Tom knew they had found something much more valuable than any amount of money. They had found a purpose, a chosen family, and the opportunity to make a real difference in the world. And in the end, that was the true wealth, one that no lottery ticket could buy, but that they had earned through tears, forgiveness, and an unwavering commitment to do good. It was a treasure that would continue to grow and multiply, touching lives and transforming communities long after the last cent of the lottery prize had been spent.